I need to read this statement. As authorized by Utah Code 52-4, this meeting is being held electronically without an anchor location to reduce the risk of health and safety from COVID-19 by limiting the frequency of in-person meetings. So moving forward on our agenda, before we get into this, board members, we have a pretty full agenda today with quite a few time certains. So we'll do our very best to meet those. We might have to move a few things around, maybe committee reports or something if needed. So if you'd be mindful of those time certains, that would be really good. So again, appreciate you meeting today. Next on our agenda, we're going to have our board member message, and that's going to be given by board member Scott Hansen. Member Hansen, Hansen, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. Is my audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. I appreciate the opportunity this morning. Last time I gave this message, I used the opportunity to extol the virtues of Payson Golden Onion Day's Labor Day celebration. Sadly, our family tradition was broken this year when Onion Day's events were mostly canceled due to COVID concerns. So today I wanted to talk about something else that's really near and dear to my heart and start off with a little story about sailing. My family has a sailboat. It's an older boat. It's not very big, about 21 feet with a small cabin. Nothing fancy, but we've had a lot of fun on it. And I find it particularly relaxing to go to a secluded lake away from everything and just sail. It's quiet, no stress. It's a good time to think and just find some peace. After a particularly stressful few weeks, which included challenges with family and work and trying to get rid of a skunk that moved into my barn, my wife Heidi and I decided to sneak in one last sailing trip before the end of the season. So we decided to head up to Flaming Gorge for a couple of days on the lake. Just sailing and camping and getting away from it all. We checked the weather forecast, mid-70s, 15 to 20 mile an hour winds, perfect fall sailing weather. We made all the necessary preparations. We packed our sailing gear and our camping stuff, and we headed out. And I have to report that things didn't go quite as we planned. We arrived on schedule, more or less, and we set up the boat without too much trouble. It had been a few weeks since we'd been sailing, and the keel winch was stuck. But WD-40 and a few taps with the hammer freed that up, and we were good to go. So we made our way out of the marina and onto the lake. We raised the sails. Conditions were perfect. Warm, steady, mild breeze, and we were zipping along. Then conditions changed quickly and for the worse. The wind picked up to 30 miles an hour or so, which was fine. We reefed the mainsail and we kept going. Then it started to gust up to 40 miles an hour or more and kick up whitecaps, and water was splashing up over the sides of the boat and into the cockpit. Our kids would tell you that I generally have a pretty high tolerance for adventure. They might say that my wife, maybe not so much. And at this point, she was really at her limit. A few minutes later, the boat was heeled over so far in the gust that it was downright scary, and capsizing was a real possibility. And this was enough for both of us. So we dropped the sails and put up a little storm sail and headed back to the harbor. And on the way back, the weather got better. The wind smoothed out, and we, with some coaxing on my part, we headed out again to give it a try. It was smooth sailing for a little while, and then some dark clouds moved in and the wind kicked up again in gusts, and we finally decided to call it a day and headed back to the marina. So we took the boat out and we stowed our gear, and then we looked at each other and said, now what? Our goal had been to get away for a couple of relaxing days, and we had prepped perfectly for sailing and staying on the boat on the lake, and these unexpected storms and gusty winds had really wrecked our plan. So we decided we could still camp, and we checked Google Maps for a spot nearby.
Okay.
According to the voice of the phone, we really started to get some strange looks.
Okay. Hey, so Scott, we hang on one sec, Scott. Scott, hang on a sec. We've got somebody's mics on, and we're not hearing you.
Oh, that's not good.
So hang on one sec. So the last two sentences I didn't pick up.
Okay.
Okay, I think you're good now.
All right, we'll go back. So
go back a little. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Where we had gotten blown off the lake, had to make an alternate plan. We found a camp spot on Google Maps. We followed the prompts and really started to get some strange looks from passing hunters and campers as we pulled the sailboat up a dirt road to a small lake in the Uinta Mountains. We were probably the first and the last people ever to pull a sailboat up to that lake. There was no way that boat could ever sail in the lake, and everyone that passed us knew it, and I'm sure they thought we were crazy. They had no idea that the boat was really just our odd-shaped RV for the night. And we arrived safely, we set up camp, we enjoyed a nice barbecue dinner, had a campfire, nice starry sky, and slept soundly in our trailered boat. The next day we woke up to a beautiful sunrise, amazing fall colors, and we took a nice hike, but in our boat shoes. Then we packed up and we headed home. And on the way back, we talked about the trip. It wasn't really the trip that we planned or prepared for, but we ended up accomplishing our purpose, and we came home relaxed, refreshed, and ready to take on the busy week ahead. That little experience made me think about what we've all been going through as an education community. Our teachers, our parents, administrators, support personnel, office staff, bus drivers, janitors, lunch ladies, local boards, community members, the USB superintendency and staff, the students themselves, even our board. We've been caught up in some real storms and gusts from this virus. And what we've been going through is certainly not what we prepared for, trained for, or anticipated. And I think we're all feeling a little like our boats are out of the water. I've been really impressed, though, as I've seen so many of us doing our best to make the best out of a really tough situation. To understand a little bit better what's going on, I asked a first-year elementary school teacher about her experience this year. She graduated from college in 2020, just as COVID was picking up steam. She received no special training in distance learning. She accepted her new job and didn't know what format she'd be teaching in until just a few weeks before school started. Her school started with hybrid learning and then made a quick change just recently to a 4-day in-person schedule. She said she has 2 of the 23 kids in her class on quarantine, so those kids are fully remote, and she's providing right now both in-person and remote learning simultaneously. She says that she is and has been working 12 to 13 hours every day, 5 days a week, plus 2 Saturdays a month in the classroom. She's spending lots of time preparing Canvas pages for online instruction. She said that Canvas and curriculum links regularly get overloaded when the kids are logging on from home and won't work for periods of time. When this happens, kids tend to give up, and the parents are really having a hard time getting them to restart and to keep coming back and trying until the links work. She was assigned a mentor when she came on with the district, and they're veteran teachers in her school. But she says it really feels like she's on her own because everyone, the freshman teachers and the veterans alike, are struggling with this new environment. He says in some ways it feels like it's everyone's first year. Plus, everyone's so busy and working such long hours that she doesn't want to add to their workload by asking for help. And many of them can't provide help. She's seen at least one teacher in her school break down and cry in frustration every week that she's been there. She feels in other ways that she's not alone. She says at least everyone's struggling together. She feels like school and district administration are trying to do the best they can, but she doesn't sometimes get any advance notice of what decisions are made because things are changing so quickly, and she finds out at the same time the parents do. She'd love to have the kids back on a full-time in-person schedule, but she knows that that's not possible. What she would like is some consistency in the schedule. She felt like they were just getting in the groove with the hybrid schedule, and then everything changed, and they're starting up again in the new mode. Because it's her first year, she couldn't really tell me how the kids were doing compared to normal. She did say that she took a little poll in her class, and 90% of the kids were really happy to be back in person. She speculated that the other 10% might be the gamer kids who were spending a lot of their online time at home playing games instead of just doing schoolwork. She thinks the parents in her class are divided about equally into 2 camps. Really supportive parents, really frustrated parents, and then disengaged parents. Now she's on a Friday remote schedule, and she says that's been difficult because a lot of families seem to be taking it as a day off, and the kids are completing assignments on Saturday or Sunday, which doesn't leave her any time to get her grading done. She's struggling to provide differentiated learning and follow distancing rules. She said that the desks in her class are about 2 feet apart. Says that kids are generally wearing their masks without many complaints, but it's toughest when they come in from recess and they're hot and sweaty. That makes it harder for them to wear them. And distancing is next to impossible, both in and out of the classroom. Despite all this young lady is smiling. She's enthusiastic. She loves her kids. And even though this isn't what she signed up for, she's doing her best every single day to make education happen. I think similar struggles are happening all across the education community at schools, district offices, and in homes. And just like my little sailing trip, we're all in a storm. There's a lot of uncertainty, fear, changing conditions, making decisions on the fly, and just doing the best we can with what we have. This may not be the trip that any of us planned or prepared for, but with everyone's help, we can and we are accomplishing our purpose. Education is still happening in Utah schools. I'll close my message with 3 quotes that I think are appropriate for our situation. First, Winston Churchill said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." Randy Pausch said, "No matter how bad things are, you can always make things worse." And the great educator Neil A. Maxwell said, "Regarding trials, there are no exemptions, only variations. The great challenge is to refuse to let the bad things that happen to us do bad things to us. That is the crucial difference between adversity and tragedy." I'd like to pay tribute to everyone in our school communities who are putting forth extraordinary efforts to educate our schools and make the best of an extremely challenging situation. I thank them for their efforts in formal education, but also for the emotional support they're giving our children by reaching out to them, by being kind, by learning their names, by greeting them with a smile and with kind words if it looks like they're having a bad day, or for going beyond the call of duty to stay in contact with our kids and to love them and help them. I'm not sure how a Zoom standing ovation works, but I'd like you to join me in trying one this morning. I thank you all for the time this morning.
Thank you, Board Member Hanson. Message. And next we'll have our education highlight. I'm going to highlight the McKinley Mental Program, Jeff, and I always goof up his last name, our education specialist, and Mike Carr from Washington School District is going to, I believe, Jeff, are you taking point on the conversation or the introduction?
Yes, I will. And there's multiple Jeffs. So this is Jeff Van Holten. And I'm going to pass it over to Jeff Ojeda, and he can introduce the program and the education highlight.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Chair Hensman, and good morning, Board. We certainly appreciate you giving us some of your valuable time to discuss the McKinney-Vento program. Program has been in existence for quite some time, since 1984, and it has really been instrumental in helping support our students that find themselves in homeless situations. So, Jeff, if you can pull up the presentation. And while he's working on that, let me just go ahead and get started. So McKinney-Vento is meant to remove barriers that derive from homelessness caused by a lack of a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. And those 3 words are critically important because the McKinney-Vento students are identified on a case-by-case basis, specifically looking at a lack of fixed, regular, and adequate residence for themselves. So it's an important part of the definition that we often come back to. It's meant to remove academic barriers that may be caused by homelessness. So barriers that hinder a student's full participation in school and in sponsored activities. So the law requires that we ensure that homeless students continue in full and active participation in school and immediate enrollment in school as well. And the purpose for all of this is simply to create stability in a school setting for a student that's in a homeless situation. Our LEAs have quite a bit of work to do in identifying and finding students, and that is one of the key components of their responsibility to identify those McKinney-Vento students. It's also their responsibility to post public notice of McKinney-Vento rights to parents and youth at schools, and provide professional development and support for staff, including preschool, to ensure that our kids have access to education that can help them come out of homelessness in the future. And then it's also an opportunity for our LEAs to connect families with housing and health, mental health services, and other services in the community that can help support them going through this very difficult situation. So the definition, as I mentioned earlier, is very clear in that it expects that a student that is lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence meets the definition of a McKinney-Vento, but there are also other components to that that I wanted to make you aware of. So the sharing of housing with others, that is couch surfing or living with a family for a while until they can find another family to live with. This is a very common scenario for us, and actually one of the differing parts of the definition to the housing and urban development definition of homelessness. So while you may hear in the press and the media that homelessness numbers are actually coming down, what we see in McKinney-Vento is that those numbers are actually going up. And the reason for that is many, but one of the big reasons is because the cost of living is going up. And things are becoming more and more expensive for families to be able to support themselves and be on their own. So that, along with everything else that's happened this year, has caused some really difficult situations for many of our students. It's been a challenge. So that also includes, the definition includes families and students that are living in emergency shelters and transitional shelters. If they're living in a place that's not meant to be lived in, so cars, parks, abandoned buildings, substandard housing, bus or train stations, or similar settings, all constitute a student that is in a homeless situation. And then when we talk about substandard living conditions, that includes places that are lacking in utilities, or there are infestations, or there's mold, or there's any kind of danger that would prevent or should prevent someone from living there, but has actually become a residence because there's nowhere else to go for them. And the last part of the definition that I wanted to emphasize for you was unaccompanied youth. And oftentimes we think of homeless students as being solely unaccompanied youth, but the reality is that we have many students that their whole family is displaced and they have nowhere to go. So SEAs and LEAs, according to the law, must develop, review, and revise policies to remove barriers to the identification, enrollment, and retention of McKinney-Vento students. And that includes barriers to outstanding fees or fines and absences as well. And to give you a highlight of what the makeup of our McKinney-Vento groups are, presented or created this chart for you to have a look at. Oftentimes I'm told that the majority of our homeless kids tend to be minority students, and that's not the case at all, as you can see here. And in terms of what our counts are like, you can see our listing here of some of the top districts in the state that have McKinney-Vento students, and these are identified students. So we know that there are additional students that haven't been identified who are hiding because of, well, simply not wanting others to know that they're in a homeless situation. There's a lot of stigma attached to that, a lot of negatives. People find that very difficult oftentimes to talk about. So we know that the numbers that we have, while they are as accurate as we can get, we know that there are students who are still out there that haven't been identified. But our total number for the 1920 year was 11,576 students who meet that definition. And it's heartbreaking because each one of those students, each one of those numbers is a student that is living in situations that are far beyond what we think of as the norm. And when the pandemic hit and things started to shut down, our students needed somebody to be there and be a voice for them. And oftentimes our liaisons were the connection between public services for our students and not having anywhere to go at all. So we had liaisons that specifically had to meet with city councils to try to keep restrooms open in certain parks and certain places, because while everything was shutting down, the reality is that those students had nowhere else to go to get any kind of hygiene whatsoever. So it is a really difficult job. I admire our liaisons. The law requires that every LEA has one person identified as the McKinney-Vento liaison at their school or at their district. And so I have the blessing of being able to work with these people who on a daily basis go out and sometimes even put themselves in danger to try to save our students. And I'm very grateful for Mike Carr, who is from Washington School District, who is with us today. He is one of those heroes. Definitely somebody that I admire and respect for the work that he does. And I'll turn the time over to him. Mike?
Thanks, Jeff. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So I'm not exactly sure what you want me to say starting out. I'm here at Dixie High School right now with a student that we've just started working with. Her name's Lily. As I see my job, I work with the Maslow's hierarchy of need chart, and that very bottom foundation is basic needs. And so as a student comes into our schools, we make sure that they have food, clothing, housing if we can help. So we make sure that we provide them with some clothing if they have that need. We also have different nonprofits that are very good to supply backpacks and school supplies, so they don't have to worry about those things. And if there's needs for shots, we can help with that. Birth certificates, anything that's a barrier to enrollment is our job as liaisons to help. So that student enters the door, they look just like any other student, they feel like any other student, and we tell the teachers, you're the next step up to the safety and love and belonging. And we say, if that student needs to know they are cared for, that you love them, and that you accept them however they come. And so it's, as Jeff said, it's a privilege to have a position like this, to be kind of that middle person between the family and the community to offer services. So welcome to any questions, or I do have Lily here if you want to ask her any questions. Like I said, we've just started working with her a little bit. She would come under that classification that Jeff mentioned as unaccompanied youth. She's not living with her parent right now. She's with a family friend. She's a very hard worker. She works many hours a week, and she is doing well in school, and so she just needs a little bit of support, but we're glad to help her out where we can. So Jeff, what would you like us to do?
Mike, if you could actually have Lily just share her experience so far and how the program has benefited her, that would be great.
Can you see yourself here?
Oh, hi.
Little. So just tell them about your situation.
So I started to move out of my mom's house because it was getting kind of crowded, and my friend said to come join her, and so I did. I don't know what else to say. there's nothing really much to it. Just
I'm going to get this back over here and get my agenda back on this, but I think just grab that.
Chair Huntsman, your mic is on.
Yeah, I'm going to.
I don't know if they're saying.
Everything that we've done so far, transportation and
They
clothing.
helped me a lot with like getting me transportation to school, and they're going to give me some gift cards for clothes, and they've already given me some food and some clothing. Yeah, they're really cool. They're really cool people. Okay.
So they want.
I don't know.
Thank you so much, Lily and Mike. Chair Huntsman, we'll pass it back to you. And if any board members have any questions for Jeff, Mike, Lily, anyone regarding this program, we'll pass it back to all of you.
A question from board members. And Jeff, I'm not seeing, I'm trying to get it to happen. I'm not seeing the all of our participants, so I won't be able to see any hands raised. I'm trying to turn that on. Not
Really?
Mark, have you tried going down to the bottom of your screen, and it should pull up a participants
okay.
button that you can push?
Yeah. I had my whole screen taken over by Jeff, and now I'm trying to do it, getting back in here. So this one's set. Okay, I'm in. So
Okay,
question, thanks. Questions from board members. Questions or comments? Is that Carol that I hear? I don't believe I can see Carol's hand, right?
Board member Thorpe has a hand raised.
Okay, there it is. All right. Member Thorpe?
Just a comment that I appreciate this program. It's one that I think really supports students in difficult times, and hopefully it's a temporary measure for them that provides support in a difficult circumstance for them. And I'm glad that it helps to provide some stability for them and give them some services that they need that support their success in school. So just wanted to say thank you for the program, and I'm glad that it's funded and supported, and I think it really makes a difference in these students' lives. So thank you for what you're doing, all the coordinators, and keep it up.
Member Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jeff, Mike, for your explanation today. And Jeff still has that number on the screen, 11,576. And that just breaks my heart. We know that there's some concerns that need to be addressed, but can you explain to me how those students are identified? Who selects them? Is it self-selection, or is it a school counselor that identifies those needs? Determination made. Could you help me understand that?
Absolutely. So the law requires that the liaison, the designated McKinney-Vento liaison at the LEA, is the only person who can, they and their designee are the only ones that can identify a student as McKinney-Vento. So in order to do that, there is a requirement for school registration. They usually call it a homeless form. That's given as part of school registration every year to families, where they indicate what their living status is, where they're living, if they're in a home or if they consider themselves homeless. That's one way of doing that at the start of the year. But then as the year progresses, word of mouth often happens. Counselors can make referrals. School staff can make referrals to the liaison. School administration can also do that as well, but it is the liaison's responsibility to review each student on a case-by-case basis to ensure that they are actually meeting the definition of McKinney-Vento. And it doesn't mean that they won't give help or support to students who, are in a situation that's similar, but the law does require specifically that those students that meet the definition are identified and are counted as McKinney-Vento, and then provided some of the services that we discussed a little earlier. And Mike, do you want to add on your end what that looks like?
That's a pretty good description. We try to, like in the summertime, we'll erase every student that was considered McKinney-Vento the previous year, and so we're starting over. So one of the things that I have our registrars do is to contact the parents of those who were considered McKinney-Vento the previous year to see if their situation has changed. And so that's kind of the process we've been working on the last couple of weeks is to revisit those families. So if there's still a need, couple of things that they benefit from being considered homeless is free lunch, fee waivers. I think it's one of the things you've been talking about on the state level, and transportation if necessary. And then if the student wants to pursue college by being considered homeless, it helps them with their FAFSA applications for financial aid. And so there are some perks, I guess, to being qualified as homeless. And so we really try to identify as many kids as we can to help them.
Thank you. Chair, can I ask a follow-up?
You bet. Follow-up? Yes.
Mike and Jeff, for that explanation. Can you tell me if you identify some additional needs that are not being met that are critical, what's your second level approach? What do you do to help assist those additional needs? Do you have a process in place, or are you confined to remain in the lane that you're in currently?
So McKinney-Vento is specific to education, and going past that for any additional services, one of the roles and responsibilities of the LEA liaison is to ensure that they become the bridge between that family and student to community services that can help support in ways that we in education can't. So we do get some federal funding based on our numbers of McKinney-Vento students. Those funds are specific to address academic needs. Can't be used for rent or any of that kind of support for families or students. But again, the law requires that the liaison have contacts within the community that can help provide some of those resources that we in education can't. So the liaison really does become the student advocate in a way that is rare, I think, in how we work with students, because it is such a one-on-one type of relationship. We see the folks that are in that situation, like Mike, really having strong relationships with students, and this relationship not only helps to provide those additional services, but also helps to support those students in school, because they have someone who is actually observing them and caring for them as they go through the process. And we haven't talked yet about some of the other things that our liaisons do, like work through credit recovery and credit accrual, and matching up credits for students that are coming from 5-6 different places, and trying to fix and set what that means in Utah and how that student can keep those credits. So there's a lot of work involved that happens, and our liaisons really are our lifelines for our students that are in a situation like this.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Board Member Haynes?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Can I share just a little bit more? Is that okay? So, as Jeff mentioned, the community efforts to help us. We here in St. George, we have a very giving community, and a couple of years ago, I decided to sort of plot how much money value that all of the things that people gave us accumulated to. And I figured out it was approximately $400,000 worth of goods and services that the community gave us. And it was just astounding. The other thing that we have in our school district, and I think many school districts, is a foundation. And we have a sub-account, it's called the at-risk account. So people in our community can donate to that account. And that's where I can help pay with the rent and the utilities and unique such things that people have. So for example, yesterday, had a grandma whose battery went out in her car. She needs to take her grandchild to and from school. So we helped out with that. A lot of times, tires for a car. Yesterday also, the family that had been homeless for a while, they were in a temporary living situation for about 3 months, and then finally got into a place on their own, but they had no furniture, no washer, dryer, those kind of things. She approached me, said, "Do you have a washer or dryer?" And I sent out an email through all the networks that I have, and within an hour, we had a washer and dryer for her. So those are the kinds of things that are really special, is in terms of helping any of our students, not necessarily just those who are considered homeless.
Thank you. Board Member Lear.
Thank you. I just wanted to quickly emphasize a couple of things Jeff just mentioned. I really have always appreciated this program because there is a little bit of money from the federal government that goes to LEAs who serve homeless students. And I think that is a holdover and very unlike most programs. So I heartily support that. And the second thing is kudos to one of the districts I represent, Salt Lake District, that serves a lot of those homeless students and has always done that in a very generous and inclusive way. And I very much admire the efforts that Salt Lake has made to serve many homeless and sometimes emancipated students who live in its boundaries. So I really heartily appreciate and support all of those who work with this program.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Lear. I thought there was another hand up. I'm not seeing any. So thank you, Jeff and Jeff, for bringing this highlight to us. And I'd like to express my gratitude for all the mics that are out there, mic cars that are working within those districts. It's one thing that speaks unique about Utah is there's actually a pursuit to find and invite. And you guys are doing just an awesome job of searching these students out and getting them in our education system. And even as they move from one district into another, the collaboration that you guys have with each other is very helpful. So thank you so much for your service there. These numbers are a little bit shocking, but they could be higher, too, out there. And again, thank you. And when you have an opportunity to thank the communities that also help prop this program up, express our gratitude for them. So I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you for being our education highlight today.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Board, for the opportunity to be able to do so.
Thank you.